You have to wonder, how does someone experience the absolute worst of humanity and come out of it with a message of hope for the world? Well, today, we're going to explore the life of Elie Wiesel, a man who did exactly that. When he won the Nobel Peace Prize back in '86, the committee didn't just call him a writer or a survivor. Nope. They called him a messenger to mankind. And that phrase, that right there, really frames everything he stood for. So it begs the question, right? Who was this man really? And what could possibly happen to someone to forge a voice that powerful? To understand, we have to go all the way back to his youth, to the single, devastating experience that would come to define his entire life's mission. He described it himself with these just haunting words. Notice he doesn't call it a historical event. He calls it a personal discovery, the discovery of the kingdom of night. And it all happened so fast. He was just 15. One minute, he has a normal life. The next, his world just completely collapses. First, they were forced into ghettos, then crammed into a cattle car for days, not knowing where they were going. And that journey ended at Auschwitz, in the dead of night, where he was separated from his mother and little sister forever. One of the very first things he saw there was fire. And we're not talking about a campfire. We're talking about huge flames leaping from a ditch where the bodies of children were being burned. In his famous memoir, Night, fire becomes this recurring, horrifying symbol, not just of Nazi evil, but of the moment his own faith in God started to burn away. In his book, he makes this vow of remembrance. It is honestly one of the most powerful passages ever written. Let's just sit with it for a moment, line by line. It all starts with that first night, the one that he says never truly ended. He doesn't let you look away. He forces you to see exactly what he saw, connecting that horrifying smoke to the faces of children, all happening under a sky that was just completely silent. And here, he makes that devastating connection crystal clear. The physical flames he was witnessing were the very same ones that were burning down his entire spiritual world. You might think it was the screams that were the worst part, but for him, it was the silence of the world, the silence of God. He says that's what robbed him of the will to even live. I mean, the destruction was total. This wasn't just physical pain. He calls it the murder of his God, of his soul. It was the complete and utter annihilation of his entire inner world. So after experiencing something like that, something that shatters your entire universe, how do you even begin to find the words to speak again? This next part of his journey is all about that transition, from a silent witness to a powerful voice of testimony. Get this, for an entire decade, 10 years, he said nothing about what happened to him. Just try to imagine that. A decade of carrying that kingdom of night inside, probably thinking there just weren't any words for it. And when he finally did break that silence, it wasn't just to tell his story. The title of his first memoir was, in itself, an accusation, and the world remained silent. He wasn't just a witness to the horrors. He was a witness to the world's indifference. From that initial decade-long silence and that one pointed title, his testimony just exploded onto the world stage. The version we all know, Night, has been translated into more than 30 languages. The world simply couldn't remain silent any longer. But, writing Night was really just the beginning. That experience forged a whole philosophy for him, a moral legacy that was all about fighting one single enemy. And this quote gets right to the heart of it. For Wiesel, the opposite of love wasn't hate. It was indifference. He believed the greatest danger, the greatest sin of all, was to see someone suffering and just turn away. Think about the choice they faced after the war. I mean, they could have embraced that darkness. They had every right to choose revenge or nihilism. But instead, they chose to rebuild. They chose hope. They chose dignity. They chose humanity. And this is his message to mankind boiled down. He took his own, very specific tragedy and turned it into a universal moral code. It's pretty simple, really. Don't be indifferent. Help people who need help. Give hope where there is none. He insisted that we must use the memory of suffering to prevent more suffering for anyone, anywhere. So that brings us to the final piece of his legacy. And it's maybe the most important part, because it's not about the past. It's a question he was asking about the future, a question for us.
As his generation of survivors got older, he was haunted by this question. When the last person who was actually there is gone, who's going to tell the story? Who will testify?
And this was his profound answer. It's so simple but so powerful. He believed that listening isn't a passive act. To really, truly listen to a witness is to take a piece of that story onto your own shoulders. You become the next link in the chain of memory. So by engaging with his story today, by hearing his testimony, we're not just spectators anymore. We've become witnesses. And that responsibility to remember, and more importantly, to act, well, now it's ours.